Lapit na. Yeah, sir. Hindi ka matalit ko dyan. So ngayon naman palabas na tayo ng ating Nantes building. So on for our next spot.
Dito, ano naman tawag sa ginagawang building na to?
Ayan, yung tawag naman po dyan is yung Innovation Building. Ayan, yan yung first building dito sa Lopez Quezon na may elevator.
Ano namang madalas na ginagawa niyo dito sa gymnasium?
Ayan, yung madalas naman po namin na ginagawa dito sa gymnasium ay yung mga student activities. Merong mga student activities na initiated by the student government. Ayan, meron tayong ginaganap tuwing Wednesday na aerobics. Yung tatawag natin na Wellness Wednesday na tuwing 6 a.m. or 5:45 a.m. ay ginaganap yung aming aerobics. Ayan, meron din ginaganap din ng mga organizational activities. Initiated naman yun by different interested clubs and university chapter organizations.
Nakakamiss maging college.
Kaya nga po. Kaya nga po, college naman ako eh. Ayun, yun lang po yung mga ginagawa namin. So, minsan nagkakaroon dito ng mga basketball, ang mga naglalaro is yung mga students and yung ibang professors ng PNU sa ayun. So, yun na yung mga ginagawa namin. And yun, kasama rin siya sa mga nililinis. So, every Wednesday nililinis din ito ng mga PNSO students. So, one fact lang po, isa lang ang utility ng PNU South Luzon.
One man.
Yan, yes, one man. Kasi lahat ng students ng PNU South Luzon ay masisipag po. Yan, every Wednesday nagkakaroon kami ng general cleanup.
So, lahat naman pala ng students.
Yes, yes po.
Tulong kami.
Yes, tulong-tulong kami.
Education,
ng mas
interdisciplinary. Lukad is the official open access journal of Philippine Normal University South Luzon, Philippines. It is a peer-reviewed, interdisciplinary, and multidisciplinary journal. The journal seeks to publish research articles, monographs, and book reviews across the different topics, with special emphasis but not limited to the following: technology and livelihood education, culture and heritage education, critical pedagogy and literacy, and local history. On our Lukad journey, we were able to produce 3 webinars and a 3-day virtual conference on September 24 to 26, 2020. Lukad is a Tagalog term for removing coconut meat through special utensils. The process involves simple to complex methodologies, so coconut meat comes out whole. For more information, you may contact us through the following:
imagine a world without a genius mind. That's not possible. But a world without philosophy. That's not possible.
Name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Saan mang panig ng Quezon, kung nais ng panauhin na makalapit ka agad ang loob sa mga binatngan, kailangan niya magsama ng isang taga rito na magsisilbing tulay ng unawa.
We must reflect on the meaning of the current pandemic to apply philosophical reflection in facing the multiple crises we are facing and going through.
Freedom for him is something that is dynamic. Freedom is something that can contribute to the empowerment of people and to the development of society.
We think that one of the many possible replies to these questions pushes us to be more inclusive and find new ways of thinking that could address the undervalued contributions of women who are doing philosophy in the country.
Like Siniza did, despite his limited resources. I hope that we could have our philosophical parents and the people we're giving tribute to as our inspiration.
Pero nakakalimutan yung aspekto ng pakikinig. Okay? Yung aspekto ng pagiging bukas sa isipang hindi nakasulat.
Sa paggamit ng wikang Filipino, binubuksan natin ang ating kamalayan sa katotohanang kayang bigkasin ng ating wika. Sabay rin nating natutuklasan ang mga aspeto ng totoo na hindi nito kayang bigkasin.
If the banner of phenomenology is that philosophy must be grounded in, move within, and impinge upon human lived experience, somehow all of these insights, why this is important to Doc Reyes, is also seen in the way that he goes through all of his mundane tasks according to the testimony of his own children.
What then is the challenge of contemporary Filipino philosophy? My answer is simple. So keep on going, to resist the temptation of slithering back to the ways of idleness and mediocrity, to develop the stalwart spirit that dares to think beyond the scope of the popular conception. In one word, to philosophize.
studied in University of Chicago in the mid-1930s and was working with the British analytic philosopher Bertrand Russell, one of the leading proponents of the logical positivist movement.
Sa uli ay marahil tama si Pilosopong Tasio, di lahat ay natutulog sa madilim na gabi ng bayang ito. Dahil may mga nag-iisip at nandyan si Emerita Quito. Isa siya sa mga nag-iisip nung panahong marami ang mga natutulog.
So, and with this, okay, Dr. Gripaldo, still, okay, I still consider him, okay, as the Filipino philosopher at the margins. It's because there are only few philosophers who recognize his great contribution in our endeavor.
Sa muli po, marami pong salamat at magkita-kita po tayo sa susunod na webinars na gagawin ng PNPRS. God bless po and stay safe.
All right, what a wonderful video. Thank you so much. So with this, that's how the quality policy of Philippine Normal University, South Luzon. Once again, good morning, everyone, and welcome to LUCAD Research and Journal and Management Capability Program. We would like to acknowledge the presence of our Dean, Dr. Rodrigo D. Abenes, our experts, friends, colleagues, faculty from PNUSL, and editorial board of LUCAD. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being with us. We are now live on Facebook page of LUCAD Journal. Without further ado, allow me to introduce to you the Dean for Academics and TLE of PNUSL for his opening message, none other than Dr. Rodrigo D. Abenes.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Jason. But before I give my opening remarks, I would like to just show you a simple video just to give a glimpse on what is LUCAD research and journal management capability is all about.
One research study published in Taylor and Francis titled Towards a Philosophy of Academic Publishing said, and I quote, "For academic institutions, academic publication in high-quality journals is a vehicle for improving the ranking and standing of the institution. For an academic, it is the means by which research grants are obtained and promotion secured."
I welcome you all in this afternoon's LUCAD Research and Journal Management Capability Strategic Planning 2021 series, focusing on the philosophy of academic publishing.
So this program is actually designed and intended into three reasons. Number one is to capacitate faculty members and LUCAD editorial board for journal management and research writing and dissemination. And the number two is we wanted to strengthen and cultivate a strong and sustainable research culture. And we wanted to really increase our research production that had really a great impact to the community.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much. First of all, thanks for your lovely introduction, Brenda. Thank you and congratulations, Rodrigo. It's great to see you. I wish I could be there with all of you in the Philippines. I'm going to talk about the philosophical aspects of academic publishing on a personal level and on a professional level. Right, because a journal consists of articles primarily. That's what most of a journal is the articles and the people who write the articles. So we're the people who write the articles. Academic career and your goals in publishing as an unfinished story and a kind of cycle that goes around over time.
The university, it's about the inclusion of research, also extension and production.
Glad to have you with us this sunny morning. Today's webinar is titled Research Management, which is part of the series on the LUCAD Research Journal and Management Capability Program 2021.
Administrators at PNU, South Luzon, fellow professors, academics, and fellow researchers. And good morning also to my collaborator. The way to teach research is to do research with your students. You cannot teach research by saying step 1, step 2, step 3, then do this. Do this. The best way is to do the conceptualization, do the planning, check the progress of the data gathering. Told me this, okay, you are now a college administrator. I was the research director of CLA, but she told me, do not forget your research output, your research projects, because one day you're an administrator, but another day you are no longer an administrator.
Okay, so now I've given you the context of our series of webinar. So to our Executive Director and Provost, Dr. Roel B. Avila, to the Executive Governor of PNPRS, Sir Job Jim Aguas, and to the PNPRS board members, and also to the editorial board of LUCAD Journal, and also to the faculty and staff of Philippine Normal University, and also to our guests for today. So maybe you will be asking why we are doing this. It's because this is in line with strengthening the culture of research among faculty and staff and other key players in the university, particularly in institutionalizing a research development program in a very small campus in South Luzon, or particularly a campus of Philippine Normal University in South Luzon. So I made mention that the program objectives is that we wanted to capacitate. There are 3 program objectives that we wanted to do. It's to capacitate faculty members and LUCAD editorial board for journal management and research writing dissemination. And number 2, to increase and cultivate a strong and sustainable research culture. And then number 3 is to increase the PNUSL research production. And then during our second webinar with Dr. Dimiterio, we realized that we should extend particularly our partnership with different stakeholders. It's because we wanted also to strengthen and to increase our research partnership and collaboration. It was for this reason that we are extending our extensive training workshop that is for the whole year to our partners, just like, for example, PAP and PNPRS and future collaborators. In this regard, later I will be sharing to you in our chat box our call for advisory board and reviewers. If you are interested to be part of our learning community, particularly the LUCAD Journal, a journal of an online journal of pedagogy. In the Google form, you will find exclusive benefits and privileges of advisory board and reviewers of LUCAD Journal. Now, maybe you may ask, why Editors Collective? In our conversation with Professor Jackson during our first webinar on philosophy of academic publishing, we realized the difference between research writing and journal management. As a teacher education institution aspiring to be a research teacher education university, we find it imperative to have our journal as our avenue in digitization, diversification, and decentralization of knowledge production and research. With this, journal management is not the same as with research writing. Unlike research writing, I don't know whether you will going to agree with me or not, but there is no formal training and even formal mentoring program in journal management. I think, and I invited speakers, I think our invited speakers learned about journal management when they are already editors-in-chief, and I guess they are still learning the ropes. We invited Dr. Pada and Dr. Aguas because we have witnessed how Critique and Filosofia grow from its humble beginnings. Critique started in 2007, and Filosofia, though it started in 1970, but it was revived by Dr. Gripaldo in the mid-90s. These two journals are the most highly respectable journals in the Philippines. It's because of their status of being Web of Science and Scopus Index. These two journals started from scratch with very limited resources, and its asset is only its very committed individuals who are working pro bono. As I look at these two journals, they adopted best practices based on two different models. Critique, for instance, worked with UST philosophy core faculty and alumni, and Filosofia from its working small research society, the PNPRS. With all of this, we are all gathered today because we wanted to know their secrets, or better still, lihim ng karunungan, so that we will be able to help them, because for sure, they have not even articulated yet in any academic gatherings. With this, I would like to introduce our two speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Roland Pada, or Dr. R.T. Pada. He is an associate professor of the Department of Philosophy, Faculty of Arts and Letters, and University of Santo Tomas. He earned all his degrees from the same university and under the same university. He is also a researcher from Research Center for Culture, Arts, and Humanities, and he is one of the founding editors of Critique, an online journal of Filosofia, and currently serves as one of its editors-in-chief. Our second speaker is Dr. Job Jim Aguas. He is a full professor of philosophy at the University of Santo Tomas, Manila, Philippines. He is affiliated with Philosophy Department, Faculty, Arts and Letters, and the Center of Religious Studies and Ethics of UST. He is the Executive Governor of the Philippine National Philosophical Research Society. He is the Editor-in-Chief of the International Index Filosofia, an international journal of philosophy. He is a member of Asian Association of Christian Philosophers and former president of the Philosophical Association of the Philippines, serving from 1990 to 2012. His publications are Person, Action, and Love, and the Philosophical Thoughts of Carl Wojtyła Towards Understanding of Human Person, and The Good and Happy Life, an Introduction to Ethical System, and he has published articles in different international journals. With this, we would like to welcome our two guest speakers. Let us give them a virtual applause.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abenes, for introducing our experts and brilliant speakers for today's session. Journal Management Editors Collective. Now may we invite our editor-in-chief from Critique, an international journal of philosophy, Dr. Roland Teus de Espada, to please share your screen.
Hello. Morning.
Good morning, sir.
Thank you for inviting me. I have prepared a presentation. It will be 2 parts. I prepared a presentation on journal management as well as journal operations. So one of the things that I'd like to cover, of course, is how a journal ought to be planned. And I'm going to talk about it in this presentation. So anyway, so as my experience would tell me, as I started out as a managing editor in Critique, and of course the managing editor in Critique is pretty much going to handle all the communications and all the logistic aspect of the journal. So let me begin by going through the planning phase. So I've seen the LUCAD website, and of course it's a very good initial site. And there are a lot of questions that one has to consider when developing a site or developing a journal. So I've also noticed that, of course, the frequency of publication isn't indicated yet, and I'm sure you're going to find a very good balance of the number of publications per year that you want to put out. So in the planning phase, of course, you have to ask the frequency of the publication of journals, okay? And you also have to include what kind of stakeholders are you going to have in your journal. So number one, of course, you have to look at the readers who are going to read your journal, and who are the people who is going to contribute to the journal. Because at the end of the day, you also have to look for referees for that journal. So I think LUCAD has a very ambitious and yet difficult scope or coverage that you want to take up as a journal. So multidisciplinary, of course, is very difficult to run, because you need to source not only the contributors but also the referees that would be willing to take up the extra work that is involved in a multidisciplinary journal. So this is one of the reasons why in Critique we tried to limit the coverage or the scope of what we can accept as papers. However, of course, the scope in Critique is still quite wide, pretty much encompasses all the possible philosophical topics. So my usual suggestion with any journal that asks for advice is, of course, to have a very specific window first of the topics that they can actually accommodate. Because if you can't identify the actual topics that you're going to cover in your journal, you're going to have difficulties sourcing the possible referees for your papers. Anyway, I mentioned that journal themes and topical coverage. Refereeing procedures, of course, it's also one of the things that I'm also going to cover. How you communicate with your referees and every stakeholder involved in the journal is also another thing. And of course, the journal style and format. So in the case of the frequency of publication, it depends on the availability of contributors and referees. So is it annual, semi-annual, or quarterly? Are the publication dates going to be optimal for the people involved in the journal, or all the stakeholders. For example, June and December issue in Critique is, of course, was initially designed to take into consideration the breaks during the semester. Of course, the breaks are now different, but nonetheless, it was originally intended to do June and December for that ease of transition between working as a, of course, as a teacher, and then working as a journal manager. In some cases, of course, you want to have a space for special issues, because special issues are those instances in the journal where you can actually publish another issue, okay, that is not within the original scope of publication dates. For example, you have a very good conference with, and you've gathered a good amount of promising papers and you want to publish it. A special issue would actually be a very good idea. And of course, publication dates, as I've mentioned, should facilitate the ease of contributors, referees, and editors during an academic year. Now, I've mentioned stakeholders. Of course, they would be your contributors, readers, and referees. And you have to ask yourself the question, will the journal publish papers from people such as undergraduate or graduate students? Will it also accept external submissions from other institutions, or is it an internal type of acceptance of submissions? And will it also accept faculty submissions and feature papers from lecturers? So you have to look at those options. Now, in the case of journal themes and topical coverage, this must cater to the interests of the stakeholders. So you must have a very clear and encompassing coverage. So will it accept papers from other disciplines? And if the coverage is too broad, the journal, of course, will be overwhelmed by review tasks. So during one of Critique's acceptance into those indices, one of the problems that I had when I was still a managing editor of Critique was receiving submissions from other disciplines that aren't really philosophically oriented. For example, I received papers such as papers discussing K+12 without any philosophical implications or any philosophical content. So imagine the issue that we have there. Of course, by being very specific about the topical coverage that we were going to accept certain types of paper, we can immediately tell the submission or the contributor to, of course, submit the paper or the article elsewhere, because our coverage does not include pedagogy or educational management topics. So that would actually be very helpful in the case of any journal that is starting out. So of course, you also have to consider the pool of referees. This is very important, and actually this is actually very, very essential in any journal. So if you don't have referees, the journal will not function. Of course, contributors are always there, but referees are very difficult to source. So you have to look for referees in the faculty, the graduate or undergraduate students, internal or external faculty members. And if starting with a thematic or special issue, there should be a pool of experts for the topic or the theme. So for example, if you, Women's Day, a few days ago. So if you're going to start a special issue on women and philosophy, for example, you also have to pull a number of experts from those fields in order to facilitate a certain special or thematic issue. And of course, for a general theme, there should be a steady and available pool of referees. And you have to imagine how difficult it was for me to source those people, because Critique does not pay its referees. We just say thank you. Okay? And fortunately, I've seen a lot of very willing scholars, not only from the Philippines, but also from other parts of the world. We're really willing to referee papers. without any expectation of some kind of monetary compensation. Now, in the case of refereeing procedures, you also have to have a very important screening phase. This is something that we've learned in Critique only after a few years of running the journal. Okay, so you must have a criteria for immediate rejection, and they could be as one of the following things that I've mentioned here. Number one, of course, if the paper doesn't conform to the themes that you accept in your journal, that could mean an immediate rejection. The paper does not conform to citation style, that could be rejected, but of course with the disclaimer that if they conform to the citation style, of course you will consider the paper for review. I strongly recommend that because changing the citation style of a submission is going to be time consuming. It's something that you don't want to really work on as a journal. So it must be clear that at the beginning of the publication, the paper should be already formatted, at least in the citation style of the journal. And of course, plagiarism is a very big red flag. If the paper is plagiarized, there's no way that you should actually include that in the possibility of being reviewed or published. And of course, quality, okay, and originality. So if there are already a lot of topics about a specific area that are already out there and published, there's a very important need to consider the originality of the paper. So in Critique, we also do double-blind reviews, meaning that the referee doesn't know who he or she is reviewing, in as much as the author doesn't know who was in charge of the review. And to streamline the process, since you've already screened the papers, okay, I highly recommend having at least or only one referee per paper. And if you're going to have multiple referees, there's always a good possibility that you should have more than two or an odd number. So it's already difficult to have 3 referees look at a certain paper. 2 is not going to be a good thing because there's a possibility of 1 vote of yes and 1 vote of no. And 1 is probably the most optimal because it's already an odd number. No one's going to oppose the person who rejects the paper. So for communications, editors should be able to track the status of the submission under review, rejected, accepted, etc. This is something that we've always had a lot of difficulty in Critique because, of course, you have to understand Critique editors are also UST faculty members, and UST, of course, does not provide any kind of deloading or incentive for faculty members to operate the journal. So communications of review requests, acceptance of the paper, and rejection, that used to be my task or my responsibility as a managing editor in Critique. So it's something that we are going to pass on to the new generation of Critique managing editors. And of course, my recommendation is to course all communications via email. Email is formal. Email can be screened, then email doesn't require you to respond immediately. Because if you're going to consider using things like social media platforms, that's going to be very time consuming. And you have to understand that there are a lot of people who want to publish their papers and are in a rush to publish their papers. So it's very difficult to use the social media as a platform for communicating with your journal. So in our case, the division of labor goes on as follows. The editor-in-chief is the administrative person in charge of communications. And the editor-in-chief should also be responsible for taking over all the duties of the managing editor. While the managing editor, of course, is in charge of tracking and author referee communications. So of course, you also have to consider journal format in the case of citation. Okay, although we use footnoting, okay, in Critique, I strongly recommend that a combination of parenthetical and footnotes would be optimal. Okay, so you also have to design the font style or the article layout, font style, and size, spacing, etc. And consider the possibility of using cover designs. So we rotate cover designs. Sometimes we ask a colleague, sometimes we ask a friend, sometimes we provide the cover design. Okay, and of course, just simply credit the people who contributed to the cover photo or cover art. So composition, of course, is very similar to what I've already seen in LUCAD's site. You have an editor-in-chief. You also have managing editors, copy editors, and layout and design editors. So I think it's already okay. And of course, you also have to have what we would call as continuity planning. So call me morbid, but I'm also always looking at the possibility of one of the editorial members is going to be incapacitated or perhaps die. And the idea that I have with Critique is that we're ought to be a journal that functions much like a hydra. So if you cut one of the heads off, another 2 or 3 more heads will grow. So you have to plan for these contingencies. That's why training possible people that would take over the journal is always a good thing. So there's a possibility of sickness and death in EICs and managing editors. Others contingency that you should plan for are the scarcity of submissions from contributors. And one of the difficult thing that I've always faced as when I was a managing editor is the unavailability of referees and reviewers. Besides, of course, the usual lack of funding and technical support. So we were the funding and the technical support team when the journal was just run by a few editors. With me, Dr. Bolaños, and of course the other founding editors of Critique. So the journal must have a plan for succession and must continue to train prospective editors. And this is something that you also see in Philosophia. So Dr. Gripaldo was already training, of course, a successor when, of course, we have Dr. Aguas to thank for that continuity of the journal. So anyway, so that's my presentation on journal management. I also have a presentation on journal operations. So anyway, just to check, is my audio clear before I begin?
Yes, sir, loud and clear.
Thank you. I'll move on to my presentation on journal operations, and this is going to be an expansion of the first presentation. So I always look at the operation of the journal in the following phases. There's a screening process, a review process, and of course the most important one, which is communications and tracking. So as part of the screening process, and this would also help a lot, particularly if you're going to have DOIs or digital object identifiers integrated in your journal. One of the things that you need to ask is, of course, the following details. Name, institutional affiliation, ORC ID. They have one. Proper citation format, minimum and maximum word count, and the list of authors. So the screening process should reduce other tasks involved in the operations of the journal. So I mentioned, of course, that if you already have all these information, creating the metadata for the DOI is going to be a faster process. So in our case, of course, the screening process is going to be usually done by the managing editors. They're there to track review progress. They are in charge of uploading papers for Turnitin and plagiarism. And the managing editor is also going to create a tracking spreadsheet or database. So the managing editor is also tasked with checking the submission for topic viability, if the paper is within the journal scope of topics or not. So apologies for that typo. So that's why we have around 3 managing editors. And I think one of our managing editors is here. Anton is here. So we're now going to train a new set of managing editors with the possibility, of course, that these managing editors are going to be EICs later on when we're already tired and old and we need to take a break from the journal. Okay, so the ME is tasked with checking the word count. The ME is also going to be there to check if the format, citation style, and basic grammar is compliant to the journal's requirements. The MEs will also be charged with the task of removing all user details from the document and assign a tracking number or code to the submission. So this is very important if you want to preserve the integrity of the double-blind review. I've sometimes received invitations to review papers from other journals, and I am sometimes surprised that the editors forgot to remove the document details in the Word file. So minsan nakikita ko pa rin yung names ng authors, and that's actually a bad thing or a bad practice, because what if the author was my friend? What if the author was someone that I didn't like? Or what if the author is someone familiar to me? Of course, yung bias with the person doing the review will play a very important role. That's why it's very important to remove all the user details in the document, and of course preserve the integrity of the double-blind review. So MEs, at least this is the ideal function of a journal. MEs will provide the task of initial board screenings to the editors-in-chief and the associate editors. So I've mentioned that an odd number is preferred for this task for obvious reasons. And for this reason, of course, the managing editor is usually exempted from the review task. So they are solely responsible for tracking and communication of the reviews. So in the case of Critique, I've been thinking of adopting a scheme where our 3 managing editors would be rotated for the issues. So one managing editor is going to be in charge of this screening process and won't be involved in the review process simply because he or she will be already taking up a lot of responsibilities. So let me talk about the roles of the editors-in-chief and associate editors. At least this is the ideal roles that I want them to take. So for papers that have passed the screening process, they need to create a short list of possible referees. So we've done this over the past couple of issues in Critique, and we usually deliberate on the screening process. Usually the deliberation in the screening process is just going to involve whether the topic is of quality, the topic is original, and if there are any possible referees that would be interested in reviewing the paper. So papers that have failed the screening, they should simply provide the reason for rejection, probably short reasons. This topic is not unique, and previous studies on this topic was done by papers such as X, Y, and Z, etc. So anyway, of course, I've mentioned voting, so let's just skip that. Okay, so our previous workflow in Critique works like this. Okay, submissions are coursed through a submission form or a submission Dropbox. I think nagka-problem kami ngayon with the submission form, so we're now reverting to manual emails. So they're all going to be tracked by the managing editor who creates the submission tracer, who would look for the following things as a screening procedure: word count, style, format, and topic. So we sometimes give them a fail okay, when one of these things are or one or more of these criterias are violated, okay, and of course they immediately get the rejection notice. In the case of a pass, the pass means that the screening board will now look at the quality, originality, and the possible referees for the paper. Okay, if they fail the quality and originality screening procedure, they're going to get the rejection notice. If they pass, of course, they immediately get transmitted to a possible referee that was shortlisted by the screening board. So again, of course, you don't want to tax the managing editor. Okay, in this case, the managing editor is no longer allowed to participate in the process as a reviewer and referee because the managing editor already took a lot of responsibility. So managing editors should keep the identities of the referee and the authors confidential. And I recommend one referee per paper or submission. So since you've already had a screening process where the associate editors and other editors are able to decide whether the paper is original or of quality. And of course, review assignments should try and maintain a pool of external scholars. From my experience, scholars from different parts of the world are usually faster when they respond as opposed to Filipino scholars. Of course, they have more time to actually do scholarly activities. So reviewer and referee invitation should be done one at a time, supposing that you follow my suggestion. And of course, give at least 3 to 5 days for the referee or reviewer to respond to the request. If, sorry for the external noise. Review requests are usually for free. Even if you ask external scholars are just simply happy to read a different paper and provide some kind of engagement with what they actually know and share it with the author of that paper. So if the journal wants to reciprocate, of course, they can invite the referee or reviewer to submit a paper for review. Okay, and of course, Filipinos would want a certification for review because it's part of their evaluation process. Okay, and of course, I'd like to maintain that as a norm, journals should not pay referees to review papers. So, as an editor, I'd like to always say that do not poison the well. If all of the referees expect a payment from the journal, then of course journals like Critique is going to have a difficult time operating. So to simplify operations, there are only 3 results from the review that should be considered: accept with revisions, or simply say that the paper is rejected. So the editor-in-chief is responsible for locating alternate referees. And that's what we have done I have done with Dr. Bolaños. So he's always going to provide me an alternate referee in case I've already communicated to 3 or even sometimes 5 referees and there are no responses or the referee doesn't want to participate in the review. So if the paper is accepted, it is submitted for further review with a statistician, depending on the kind of journal that you have. So sometimes you need a statistician, particularly if you're dealing with statistical data. Okay. Anyway, so if the paper is accepted with revisions, the result is communicated directly with the author, and the associate editors will check the compliance of the author to the revision. So if the paper is rejected, the managing editor will communicate the rejection along with the reasons and the proofs. So associate editors are there to assess papers with revision requests if they could be included in the issue or shelved for future issues. So may nakita pang problems, for example, the lack of compliance by the author from the suggestions of the referee, they can possibly shelve the paper for a future issue until the issue is resolved. So if the accepted papers pass the statistical review, of course, you have to immediately submit it to the copy editors for layout. So anyway, communications, I mentioned this, editors-in-chief are administrative communications. They are going to be in charge of communicating with the host institution, networking, linkages, and internal communications with the editorial board. So the editors-in-chief should handle serious disputes, such as plagiarism, accusations, inclusion of co-authors, which is actually a very constant issue with a lot of the papers that I've handled so far. And I think a lot of editors are also going to experience this. There would be authors who submitted their paper and suddenly one of the supposedly co-author was excluded from the list. And of course, apologies. In our case, apologies for the late review, late response, clarifications, okay? And of course, the request for permissions should the paper be a part of another publication, etc. So I've also handled those tasks. And MEs are just going to handle the coordination with authors, referees, and editors. Okay, so as a good thing that we should always prepare as a journal manager or as an editor-in-chief, we should rotate some of the functions with associate editors and editors-in-chief. That way, the journal is able to run even in the absence of some of the core members. So miscellaneous concerns, there are various ways to automate the journal. Sorry for the long presentation. I'll breeze through the following miscellaneous topics. Okay, I don't recommend management platforms that charge fees. Okay, so there are a lot of open access software like the Open Journal System. Okay, and of course things like Google Documents and Office 365 aren't going to charge an arm and a leg for a journal management system. Okay. Templates for communication should always be there. For new instances of communications with other stakeholders, the managing editor or the editor-in-chief should always add that new instance of communication to the bank of templates. So you'll be answering a lot of emails. Sometimes I remember answering emails during vacations and even Christmas and New Year breaks. So that's part of the burden of becoming an editor for a journal. And of course, there's also the possibility of monetization. Okay. While open access journals are not supposed to profit directly from the journal, there's also the important necessity of having the resources to actually run the journal. So if you're the journal, of course, LUCAD is hosted by a host institution, and you can use the conferences that the institution has as a source for papers and special issues. And fundraisers and donations could also benefit the continuity of the journal's operation. So if you know someone who recently won the lottery, it would be a good thing to be in touch with that person, because resources for journals are usually difficult to come by. So crowdfunding platforms like Patreon can also create monetization possibilities for the journal. Or if you're really going to be creative, you can also accept donations through cryptocurrency if you want to include that as a possible way of funding the journal. So anyway, journal site platforms, I don't think I need to talk about this. Sir Rod is of course already very knowledgeable about this. If anything, I think he set up the site and it looks amazing. And of course, copyrights and permission. So open access journals should let the authors retain copyright to their respective papers and articles. However, authors are required to mention the journal as its original or first publisher for their articles. So it is highly discouraged to republish an article from another journal. And of course, it's also a common practice to republish articles, essays, and papers in a consolidated collection of essays or themed essays. Just make sure that the essay that was originally published in your journal mentions that it originally came from your journal. So anyway, there's also sometimes issues of requests for translations. I've experienced that with Kritike, a Russian institution wanted to translate a paper from one of the articles that we publish in Kritike. So I had to get in touch with the author and give them that link of communication. I mentioned communication templates. Cloud operations would definitely be a lot of help, especially today. Okay, so you can pretty much run a journal using Google Drive or Microsoft 365. Okay, and mention continuity. Of course, we'll have people that would replace us later, because running a journal is a very stressful responsibility. Okay, institutional relations. Okay, anyway, that's it. If you want a copy of the presentation, of course, I'm very willing to share it. Thank you very much for enduring my discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pada, for a very insightful presentation. Actually, we learned a lot for your presentation since we are young and we still have to grow more. And a lot of things we actually note, and in the future we are trying to practice all of those so that we can improve ourselves when it comes to journal management. And we hope that in the future you'll still be with us, giving
No
us some
worries about that.
suggestions.
Yeah, it's good that you're young, because when you run a journal, you'll become old. So anyway, thank you. Of course, I'll take in questions later on. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of the things that I know about journal operations and management.
Thank you so much, Doc. Please stay with us. And for our audience, so please reserve your questions and we'll have the Q&A later. So let's get it on. I'm still excited because we still have another brilliant speaker. Our editor-in-chief from Philosophia and International Journal of Philosophy. Please welcome Dr. Joey Jim S. Aguas. A virtual round of applause, please, for Dr. Pada and Dr. Aguas.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to share something about journal management. And I'd like to thank Dr. Arti for his presentation, because he covered, I think, the important points, in managing a journal. What I'm going to share with you, I think, would be an application of what Dr. Pada have shared with you, because he covered the general principles, of course, citing some experiences of Kritike. Now, what I'm going to share is how we do this in Philosophia. So this will be really a sharing of how we manage the journal Philosophia. Okay? So let me just share my PowerPoint here. I hope you can see my slide.
Yes, Doc, it's clear.
Okay, thank you. So managing an international journal, Philosophia. So let me first introduce our journal. This is the screenshot of the website of Philosophia. And Philosophia is published by the Philippine National Philosophical Research Society, or PNPRS. It is published every January and June of each year. So here, if you listen to the presentation of Dr. Pada, you now see a concrete example of what he discussed. So it should tell you how the frequency of the publication or of the issue that comes out every year. Philosophia is abstracted in the ISI Web of Knowledge, Clarivate Analytics, formerly part of Thomson Reuters. Scopus, Philosopher's Index. It is also included in the ASEAN Citation Index database, EBSCO database. It is listed in the Ulrichs International Periodicals Directory and in International Director of Philosophy. The Philippine Commission on Higher Education, the CHED, certified the journal as Category A1 in 2012, and it was also awarded with the Journal Incentive Program, JIP, the Journal Challenge Grant in 2017. You know, these citations of Philosophia is also applicable to Critique, because we've been together in this, you know, like for example, we've been together in the awarding of the JIP of the CHED. So pretty much we have the same sort of profile, although Philosophia is handled by PNPRS, no? And Critique is run by our Department of Philosophy in UST. So the publisher of Philosophia, and this is something that is unique with Philosophia, is that it's not affiliated with any higher educational institution. It is published by a society. Okay, it is published by society. Of the 8 journals, Philippine journals that received the JIP award from CHED, only PNPRS is run by a society. The rest, all of them are managed by higher institutions. So this is the website of the Philippine National Philosophical Research Society. Now our editorial board. So again, so I'm showing you how this is, how it is done, or how the journal is done, or what is the composition of the journal. So we have the editorial board here. I am the editor-in-chief, and then the associate editor is Professor or Dr. Napoleon Babacquiao. The managing editor is Dr. Juan Rafael Macaranas. The book review editors are Wilfried Van Hoot and Noel de la Cruz, Dr. Noel Leslie de la Cruz. Now, just a tribute to the man who actually started this all, Dr. Rolando Ampaldo. He was the first the first editor-in-chief of Philosophia and the first executive governor of PNPRS. Back in 2012, after my term as president of PAP, he invited me to join him in Philosophia, and he appointed me as the associate editor of the journal, with the view of really, as Dr. Arte mentioned, of training me to handle the journal later on. But in 2017, because of his untimely death, this enormous task of running a journal just fell into my lap, and I have to really, learn how to manage it. Of course, he trained me how to edit and how to, an article, but how to run a journal, that's very far from my mind. No, so that's how I inherited this enormous task. No? Now, I'll talk about ensuring quality of our publication. Dr. Arti have already discussed about the principles, the criteria, and what a journal should do. And my sharing here would be how we do this in Philosophia. First, we define the duties and responsibilities of our editorial board. And so as editor-in-chief, the editor-in-chief receives and initially screens the submissions. And by the way, because we are run by a small organization, we really have very few people. No, we don't have the luxury of having assistants in the journal. So we do all the tasks by ourselves. So tasks are divided, but there are few people to share, to assign the tasks. So very few people working on the journal. So the editor-in-chief reviews the article. He also sends the papers and evaluation form to external reviewers. He communicates to the authors the suggestions or comments of the reviewers. informs the authors of the result of the review, and collects all accepted papers, and formats the accepted papers, sends the proofs to authors for final check, and sends the final copies to the printing press. Of course, he does many of these with the help of the other the other members of the editorial team, like for example, the managing editor. So the managing editor helps the editor-in-chief in many of these tasks, as you will see later on his duties and responsibilities. Now, the associate editor, he also reviews the papers. He also assists in sending the papers to one or two external reviewers together with the evaluation form. He also collects and collates the suggestions and comments of the external reviewers and his own review. He sends back the papers and the collected or collated comments and suggestions and the evaluation forms to the editor-in-chief. And he also assists in proofreading and copy editing the final proofs. So the associate editor and the editor-in-chief, we work hand in hand. And then we have a book review editor. So the book review editor, because we have a section in our journal, book reviews, book notices, and book notes. And it is the task of the review editor to receive all these books in journals for review. But now, during the pandemic, we haven't received hard copies of books for reviews. Before, we used to receive quite a number of books from publishers requesting that their publication or their books are reviewed for the journal. The book review editors or the editor, they also review articles. So they also serve as a reviewer. But of course, when I send them the articles or the papers for review, they have to be anonymous, or you have to remove the names of the authors. So they review books received. They also review and evaluate book reviews and notes received by the journals. If there are book reviews submitted, they are the ones who review this, and they also help in proofreading the proofs of book reviews and notes. Now, the managing editor, so just like what Dr. Arti said, he actually is the one that manages for us, he is the one who manages the corporate or the business aspect of the journal. But he also helps in reviewing the articles. Okay, it takes care of the business and the financial aspects of the publications. He communicates with the author regarding mailing, membership fees, because we collect membership fees because what do you call this? The journal is managed by PNPRS. He communicates with the printer and handles the payment for printing, prepares the financial report of the journal, and solicits donations for the journal. Now, since we are an organization, this is, as mentioned by Arti, if you have to be if you are what do you call this? If you are quite creative, then you can make some solicitations for the journal, because we only rely for our finances. We only rely for the membership fees of the journal. Before, we used when we were granted by the CHED of the Journal Incentive Program, we were awarded a certain amount, 500,000 in fact, but it should have been for 3 years. But after 1 year, they just unilaterally cut off the funding. So that's the big challenge for the journal, to how to survive financially. Submissions are coming in, the referees are there, but how to sustain this journal financially is quite a challenge for us. And I mentioned that the publisher of Philosophia is the PNPRS. The two always go hand in hand, because it is the PNPRS that supports the Philosophia. PNPRS exists for Philosophia, and Philosophia exists because of PNPRS. So one exists for the other, and the one exists because of the other. That's the relationship between the PNPRS and the Philosophia. So additionally, the managing editor handles subscription of the journal and collects all payments for the subscriptions. Subscription because, again, while we have an open access journal, the online version of the journal is open access, we also print copies, hard copies of the journal for our members, for the members of the PNPRS. So if you apply for membership of PNPRS, then you have a free copy of the journal. Okay, so 1,000 membership, 1 year membership for PNPRS, and then you have a free copy, printed copy of the journal. So that's how the dynamics between Philosophia and the PNPRS. Now, let me talk about our review process. Okay, how we review the articles. So this is the Philosophia review process. Many of these aspects have been discussed already by Dr. RT. So let me just show how we apply this in our own process. So first, you have this, of course, the submission of the author, and we normally accept submissions through emails. No? Email through the Philosophia editor Gmail. Okay, so that's the form of submission to Philosophia. Okay, and then there will be initial assessment by the editorial board. So the editorial board is composed of the editor-in-chief, of the associate editor, the book review editors, and the managing editors. So they have the initial assessment, and here you can see how we initially review the submitted articles. Many of these been mentioned by Dr. RT. So first, we assess if it is a philosophical article. So we check if this is really about philosophy, because sometimes, as mentioned by Dr. RT, you may receive articles or papers. I don't call it articles yet; they are just papers. If it is it could be a philosophical article. So some would submit about education, or sometimes psychology, or about history, for example, without any philosophical content. And in the initial assessment, what I look very closely is the references. What are the references used in writing the article? Okay, because and aside, of course, from the discussion, the references will already tell you if his sources is coming from a philosophical, background. Okay, so that's one very important consideration, because right there and then, if it is not philosophical, it's not about philosophy, then that can be outright be rejected. And then second is if it satisfies the technical components, like for example, the abstract, the body, meaning the discussion, the conclusion, the references, number of pages or word counts, etc. One very important factor would be, of course, if it is written in good English. Okay, good English, and if it's already formatted according to our style, because in the website we have already we posted there, we have a page there about this unique referencing and documentation style of Philosophia, something that was adapted from Turabian and then modified by Dr. Gripaldo. So it's rather complicated way of citing. It's a parenthetical citation, so we adhere to that. We don't add that with other citation, like for example footnoting. Okay, so we have notes at the end, but we don't have footnotes. Everything is parenthetical. Okay, and then you have the notes. So it's very important that you see this, because unless the the author is willing to change the documentation style or referencing style of this paper, then that's okay. But if he does not want to change that, then then he need not continue with the continuous with the review process. So there are two things that can happen here. Two results: accepted or reject. If it is accepted by the editorial board, then it goes to the blind review process. Okay, so it's now time to assign who would be the reviewers. Okay, so we assign, or we look for reviewers. Well, we have a good number of reviewers, both local and international, as mentioned by Dr. Arti. If you are already a well-established journal, then you find scholars who are willing to review for you. And again, we don't pay for reviewers because we don't have money to. First of all, we don't have money to pay them. Although yes, the reviewers, some of them, they ask for certificates, and sometimes we give them complimentary copies of the journal, especially the back issues of the journals. Okay, so here the paper is forwarded to the external reviewers for a thorough evaluation, and the referees may decide whether it is acceptable for publication or not, or if there are revisions that need to be done on the paper. Usually, it's always for revision, because we have already initially assessed, evaluated the paper, so we don't really submit for blind review papers that will just be rejected by the reviewers, because we want to conserve on the number of our reviewers. In other words, if it will just be rejected by the reviewers, why waste a reviewer for a paper that will just be rejected? So you will see later on the tracking of these papers, if they are accepted or not. Okay, so and then after this, the paper so we send them the paper together with the article or paper evaluation form, and then we gather this evaluation. Okay, so after gathering the evaluation, three general results: accept, reconsider, or reject. But in the evaluation form, there are actually several options for the referees, as you will see later. Now, after this, once we have gathered the result, then this will be communicated to the authors. Okay, so if it is accepted, it will be communicated to the authors. If it is reconsidered, it will also be communicated to the author. And one of the more difficult thing to do is to send a rejection letter to the author. But in my experience, I have grown used to it, sending rejection letters, because of course they also have to be informed whether the paper is accepted or not, or if there are some revisions you can do to make the paper acceptable. There are some authors who, after they have received after this particular paper has been rejected, they will submit another paper again, a different paper. Okay, so we communicate to them the result of the evaluation, and we give time for them to address the comments and suggestions by the external referees and make the necessary revisions if there are any. And most of the time, there are so many revisions that they have to make. Okay, so and then they send us back the revised version of the paper. Okay, so based of course on the suggestions and comments of the referees, and of course based also on the recommendation of the author. So this process here, this revision and evaluation may take some time, because normally it's going to be a back and forth process. So it makes the revision, and then we evaluate the revision, the revised paper is evaluated again, and then it could be sent again to the external referee for the approval, especially if the referee made really detailed suggestions or comments as to how he can revise the paper. There are some authors who are very who are uh, what do you call this? They are grateful for the reviews because it's a way of improving your paper. We can also encounter some authors who don't want their papers to be, to be revised according to the recommendations of the referees. That happens. Okay, that happens. So this is, it takes rather a long process here, because again, we want to ensure that the final form of the paper, of the article, will really be a good, a quality paper. After it passed this evaluation stage, then it goes to the editing process. So what we do, once the paper is approved, we copy edit the paper, we check, no, for errors, typographical errors, even grammars. We even check, for example, the citation, if there are some errors in the citation, in the format, etc. And then after this, the final proof. So the final proof now will be sent to the author for the approval of the final draft of their paper. And with this, they also have to sign file approval form of the proofs, meaning that this is really the final form of your paper that we will publish. Because sometimes there might be some instances when the final article comes out, and then the author would give us the feedback that should not be the paper. I mean, there should be this and that. But with the final proof, so we have a mutual understanding that this is now the final form of your paper. And then after that, we go to the printing, or to the printer, and then upload the article to the website. And then, of course, then the next step is the assignment of the DOIs, no, the identifiers. So in general, that's the review process of Philosophia. So those of you who want to submit articles to us, that's how your papers will be or are evaluated in Philosophia. Now, we record, of course, we track the paper submissions, and I'm going to show you just a sample of our spreadsheet. So here, so I have erased the details, other details, right? So here you can see that so there is the initial, the date of submission, the title of the paper, the author, the institution, initial evaluation. So in general, so if it is accepted by the editorial board, then it will be sent to the referees, and we assign the referees here. Okay. If not, then we could be rejected, reject. Okay. So then you have the referees, and then revisions of the author. Actually, there are several columns here, but I have to I have to delete them because, well, they are not for public consumption. No. Anyway, and then the final would be whether it is published. If it is rejected, then it will not reach this stage. Okay, so these are now those that are published. So you can see here the papers that have been rejected or not rejected or accepted or reached up to this particular stage of the review process. So just to share with you, this is our referee evaluation form. So we have this is how the papers are evaluated. So this is the form that referees accomplish when they review the papers. Okay, so you have there the recommendation. There are actually several recommendations that the reviewer can choose from. And then minor weaknesses, suggestion for improvement, major weaknesses, suggestion for improvement, and then, of course, the overall assessment of the paper. Okay, so that's the and then This is the paper evaluation report. So we gather all the evaluation and then we collate, we summarize. So in our case, we observed that two blind reviewers. Okay, two blind reviewers, and as mentioned by Dr. Arti, that's really very difficult. But because sometimes you can have an evaluation, one accept, one reject. But since we are very strict initially in the initial assessment, more or less, we are confident that this paper will not be rejected, or at least it will have either minor or major revisions. Okay, so but there is also the very rare occasion where two evaluators have different opinion on the paper. So what happens is that I look for either I send it to the associate editor for additional review, or I look for a third reviewer. Okay, especially if the paper is it's a combination, it touches on two different disciplines, for example. Okay, so you have to cover those disciplines. Okay, that's the tricky part. No? That's the tricky part, because there are topics that covers for example, say it's women, and for example, say no, like for example, it has something to do with religion, and then has something to do with science. Okay, so there are some articles like that. So you have to have a reviewer for the scientific part, and then for the religion or theology part, something like that. Okay, so and then of course I also make my own comments, recommendations for the. And then this is an example of the final proof approval. So once after the paper's been approved, the final proof is there, then the author should accomplish this form. And then we assign the DOIs, and I really have to thank Dr. Arti for this, because actually, although Dr. Arti is working for Critique, he has done a lot of assistance of help for us, maintain how we maintain the website, how we assign DOI. So he is like the invisible consultant of Philosophia, and really a lot of gratitude, my personal gratitude for Arti for helping me out. Isang message ko lang sa kanya, andyan siya, tutulong yan. So malaking tulong sa amin si Arti, especially dun sa technical aspect ng Philosophia. Okay. So here are some samples of the DOIs. This is the recent issue of the of Philosophia, yung aming January 2021 issue. So nandiyan na yung mga DOIs. Okay. Now, article processing charge, we don't do this before, free of charge yung aming publication. Only that kailangan mo lang, you need to be a member of PNPRS, because Dr. Gripaldo made it a policy that you have to be a member of PNPRS to be able to publish to Philosophia, because as I've explained, PNPRS supports the publication of Philosophia. So by collecting a membership fee, we support financially Philosophia. But during this pandemic, and so that's the only source of income of Philosophia, the subscription and the membership fee. In 2017, we were granted by CHED with this award, but after 1 year, they stopped the funding, and we just relied on the conferences that generate income for PNPRS and Philosophia. But since it is pandemic, we don't have any source of income. And that's why we were constrained to collect an article processing charge starting only this pandemic to finance or to make the journal really financially viable, because we are working pro bono. We don't collect fees, but we spend for the maintenance of the website and the printing, and of course other expenses of the journal, like the papers, the ink, and so on. So we have this minimal article processing charge starting this year. No? Uh, Hopefully, if we can have funding from the government again, then we will remove this. Uh, but right now, our main concern really is to make the journal financially viable. Okay. Now, how do we maintain the academic prestige of the journal? Of course, Dr. Arti mentioned about the referee. So we have to have first an international and local editorial consultants and a pool of reviewers. So our reviewers, some of our consultants, they also act as referees together with the members of the editorial board. Then we also have pool of referees, both local and international. And again, as mentioned by Dr. Arti, you should have referees for every discipline or every area of philosophy uh, that your journal covers. So, for example, you should have a number of referees for feminism, for women issues, gender issues, existentialism, history of philosophy, uh, because we accept in philosophy, we accept and we cover quite a good range of philosophical areas or disciplines. So we have to have that pool of reviewers, both international and local. And the good thing is that I have my when you are because I've been a member of PNPRS and Philosophia, and I have some networks abroad, so we can get referees or people, scholars, to review our uh, our our papers or the articles. And sometimes there are also contributors, previous contributors, who you consider to be really an expert on this topic, and then there's a paper that's come up that is within his expertise. We request this contributor, previous contributor, if he can also review this paper. And of course, it's always a give and take process. So somebody reviewed your paper, although you don't know who reviewed that paper for you. So now it's also time to, para sort of pay back and review the paper of other people. Although again, you don't know who this author is. Okay, so we maintain that these are our editorial board, and we maintain a good mix of international and local consultants, and we are actually trying to include more women in the editorial consultants and in the pool of reviewers, because there are actually uh, I have observed quite a surge in the publication of articles regarding women. No, women is one of the articles in the recent issue of Philosophia is about the philosophy of pregnancy. It's a very interesting article. No? You might want to check on that. And then we also partner with international and local institutions. Again, because we are not connected with any higher educational institution, so what we do is to partner with different philosophical organizations like the PAP, Panel, Pabis Minda, CEPI, the Society, the Social Ethics Society. No? Uh, of course, we are very active in USAP. No? And we also maintain a high, we maintain presence in the international scene. We participate in this conferences. No? And it is actually through this networking outside that we are able to get reviewers, colleagues from other universities abroad who become your friends, and they are just as willing to help you in the journal as far as reviewing articles is concerned. And then we also publish papers presented in conference. One of the recent issues that we had is the commemorative issue of Philosophia, commemorating the centennial anniversary of Saint John Paul II. So it's actually a very thick, it's a long, it's a thick issue, almost more than 300 pages of Philosophia. So you might want to check on that. It's available online in the website. Another thing is we make an effort to have a public engagement in influence. We regularly update the website of Philosophia and of the PNPRS. So you can see here. Actually, if you check on this, you will be connected to the website. And then we also maintain a presence in social media, but our presence in social media is only not to communicate with the contributors or not to communicate with the with the authors, but just to inform the public that now we have uploaded the journal, so you can check the journal on our website. So that's how we maintain presence in social media, because if you will not do this, then people may not be informed. No, they may not know that you have a journal or that you have come up with the latest issue of the journal. Okay, here are some of the indexing of Philosophia. So here. This is I think this is on Scopus. I think. Babylon is in Web of Science, and then you can see here some people are asking for our impact factor. We don't have an impact factor yet, no. Although we have an H index 3 in the journals, quarter 4 in philosophy, but we are really working on having this impact factor. Okay, so that's the goal. That's the goal, to make a dent, at least to be recognized in the international scene, because a lot of authors ask about the impact factor of your journal, and I just tell them we don't have an impact factor yet. No, we are just listed in Scopus, in the ISI, those indexing platforms. But as far as impact factor is concerned, we have a long way to go. So I'm just telling you that we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go. Okay, so here are some of the recent issues of Philosophia. This is available in the website, and then this is the commemorative issue on the centennial anniversary of Saint John Paul II. So that's my sharing. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you learned something from this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aguas. For sure, we learned a lot from you, Doc. And I think our audience also expressed their thanksgiving for what they learned today. We will read all of those later on. So please let us give a virtual round of applause for Dr. Aguas. Ayan. So inhale, exhale for a while, and let's have a Zoom photo opportunity. So may we request everyone to please open your cameras for our picture taking. Okay. All right. So,
Okay, Sir Jason, ako na. Ano?
yes po, Doc. Almost half of the audience already opened their cameras.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, another one, another time. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Benes. We would like to acknowledge the presence of our Executive Director and Provost, Dr. Roel Avila. Once again, let me remind everyone, you can use your microphone if you want to ask questions directly to our speakers. Please address who will answer your question, and you can also write your question in our chat box if you don't want to ask directly our speakers. Okay, may we now open our line for Q&A.
Yes, can I have my question?
Yes, sir, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is Randy Tudi from Corioso College, Digo City, Philippines. I have a question to both for the, it's either of the two speakers can answer. I always receive rejection, and the common comments of the paper of the letters is always like, if it passes to the editor level, the common comment would be, have your paper edited by a native English speaker. So I would like to ask the speakers, what about Philosophia? What kind of English are you accepting? Because I find it annoying that they are always asking for a native English speaker. So that's why I have a dream that someday we will be also asking them to revise their paper according to have their paper edited by an Asian or Filipino native speaker. Thank you.
Sir Aguas, can
Sorry.
kindly unmute? Yes.
Yeah. Should I answer first? Okay. Anyway, I don't know what the native English. I don't. From personal experience, I never make that comment. I mean that review. The usual comment would be, have your paper, the grammar, check the grammar of your paper, choice of words, sentence construction. Basically, it's part of the grammar. It's not whether the English is native or not native. No. So in Philosophia, we don't have that kind of comment. And my comment would always be, check your papers, have somebody, an English professor, for example, an English teacher, for example, to check the grammars, the syntax, choice of words, sentence construction, etc. Things like that. Thank you.
I have something to add. Of course, it's common for anyone, even myself, even Dr. Aguas would I've seen him when his books were edited. If we submit our books to a proofreader, the proofreader is still going to find problems, and that's of course the usual experience that you have with publications. Actually, that's the dreaded part of publication. Even on my side of my experience, the grammar is still going to be corrected, and the grammarian or the proofreaders are going to find some grammatical mistakes. So on my part, I actually appreciate receiving feedback like that. It's something that we can improve. And even with several books under an author's belt, or several papers under an author's belt, you'd always experience that. So it's part of the process of publication. It's also an awful part, but it's a necessary part. And I know it's difficult. every time I publish a book, that's something that I always dread, but it's part of the editorial process. So please bear with that. That's only for the improvement of the quality of your work.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Pada and Dr. Aguas, for your prompt answer. Really, it's really some problem sometimes when we talk about of Englishes. Ano? We have our own native English. They have their own. Okay, so let's have another question from Ma'am Claudine Alhambra. Either both of you or both of the speakers may answer this. May I ask about the qualifications of the editorial board? How should they be selected? For example, are they required to have a certain number of publications as well? Thank you for the fruitful discourse this morning.
For Philosophia, the members of the editorial board are, especially the associate editors and the book review editors and the consultants, they have their own track record of publications. So you can Google them for their publication. So they publish. And what else? Yeah, I think that's what I can say.
Thank you, po.
Hello.
Dr. Artie.
On our part, it's usually per invitation. So we deliberate with the other editors. For example, who is a good editorial board member that we can recruit. So one of the things that we usually look for is the capacity to write. If they have the capacity to write and they have some publication experience, we would usually consider them. Although we're more inclined actually to recruit upcoming and promising younger members of the editorial board. So doon namin sila sinusource kasi they're also going to be trained as a part of the process. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the editorial board members should have a master's degree or a PhD or 10 published articles. We just have to look at what they know and what are their current performance in terms of publication.
If I may add also, although it's important to have your editorial board get published or that they publish or they write, sometimes one consideration also is, will they be working? Because many of these published scholars, they may not have time to work on a journal. So you also have to consider, yes, this scholar is published, but will he be working? Will he be spending, burning the night oil, working on the journal? Marami nga siyang publication, marami nga siyang libro, pero di naman siya makakapagtrabaho para sa journal. So that's very important. That's one very important consideration. Kaya sabi nga ni Arte, kailangan mo rin, you have to train young people, no? Because eventually you will not be here anymore. I think that's what Dr. Gepaldo did to me. Talagang binantayan niya ako. Hindi niya ako pinakawalan. Na, when I was still a junior faculty, tinitrain na ako na someday I'll be holding this position. So, ganun din, no? We also have to train young people, especially yung mga masisipag. Okay,
thank you so much, Dr. Aguas. I think we need a lot of dedications when we are in the journal.
Yeah.
So right. It's really hard to choose someone who will give their heart and time. Okay, so we still have some questions here from Sir Peter Paul. Thank you, Doc Artie and Doc Jovi. Just a quick question for Doc Jovi. Does the Philosophia editorial board maintain independence or autonomy from the PNPRS officers? If yes, how?
Okay. The operation actually, there's an overlap of the functions of the some of the editorial members of the of Philosophia and the PNPRS. Like for example, I am both the executive governor of PNPRS and the editor-in-chief of Philosophia, because as it was envisioned by Dr. Gripaldo, the two positions should be occupied by one person only. Okay, but down the line, of course, there is now the branching out. Like for example, the associate editor, Nap Babakyao, is not a member of the PNPRS or not an officer of the PNPRS. He's a member, but he's not an officer of the PNPRS. Dr. Johnny is a member of is an officer of PNPRS, at the same time the managing editor. The two book reviewers are not officers of the PNPRS. So there is an overlapping. But in terms of the operation, we maintain an independence, from the operation of the PNPRS. So it's difficult to have really a totally independent, the editorial board being totally independent from the PNPRS, because magkasama palagi yung dalawa, magkasama palagi nila. Although sa operation ng Philosophia, it's just me, Johnny, and then the other members of the editorial board who really work on the journal. Now, of course, from time to time we ask help from the officers of the PNPRS as far as managing the journal is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Then we have Professor Reynald Cacho. You can unmute your microphone now, sir.
Yes, good morning, sirs. I'd like to thank the speakers this morning. I'm very interested to know, since the two journals are really distinct in their nature, and the combination of the speakers are really quite a good mix this morning. First question with regard to Critique is, of course, this somehow we cannot detach the University of Santo Tomas from the journal. In the information you cited in your website, it's an open access journal of the Department of the Philosophy of UST. I just wonder how is UST in any way supporting the publication, the management of the journal, the authors, or the editorial board members that are part or affiliated in UST. What are the kind of monetary and non-monetary support those people are getting from the University of Santo Tomas in such a way of promoting and sustaining the journal? And with regard to our second speaker, yes, PNPR is a society. This is I wonder what kind of organization is this, whether is this non-profit or for-profit oriented, and to what extent is this organization, aside from its journal, working with other government and non-government agency, and how is this in any way connected in promoting the journal, including its sustainability? I don't know who want to answer first.
I'll go first. Since you've mentioned UST, we became integrated with UST at around 2011 or 2012. But when we started in 2007, we were fully independent from any institutional affiliation. So the decision to do that was actually from Dr. Paulo Bolaños, the founder of Critique, and he was also the department chair. So that's why he decided to include Critique as a journal of the Department of Philosophy. So from that point on, 2011, we barely got any kind of support from UST. The best that we could have is, of course, a 3-unit kind of compensation for an editor, but we only had that for 1 academic year. But right now, of course, there's a new program from Father J. Miranda, which incentivizes the operation of a journal. So we receive around a decent amount of resources to operate the journal. So it's sufficient, okay? Plus, we also have a cubicle in the department that we can use for planning and of course storing all the equipment that we have for Critique. So in terms of our affiliation with UST, it's something that Dr. Bolaños decided to do voluntarily. We didn't expect any support because of course Dr. Bolaños wanted to strengthen the department's research trust, and including Critique in the department was one of the strategies that he employed. And of course, it's not that we can actually pull out of the university anytime that we want to. Okay, but we're of course committed to the department. That's why we stay, or we let Critique become part of the university's publication. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Sir Joe.
Yeah, okay. First, PNPRS is a society of philosophy enthusiasts. And when I say enthusiasts, that could be teachers or professors and students of philosophy. And its advocacy is to make philosophy an essential instrument in academic and academic discipline in nation building. So it promotes philosophical research and publication through the publication of the Philosophia. As I've already mentioned, one of the main reasons or the main purpose of the PNPRS is to really support and publish Philosophia. Okay, so this is a non-sectarian, non-profit society whose advocacy is just to make philosophy to promote philosophy as an academic discipline and as an instrument in nation building. I already mentioned how we raise funds. We raise funds through membership. We raise funds through the conferences that we organize, especially before the pandemic. Sometimes we receive donations from individuals, from generous individuals who would like to support our cause. Because really, we are just relying on this, on these contributions, and we don't even have an office. We just have an official address, and the official address of PNPRS is actually our residential addresses, because we are not connected in any way to any higher institution or to an educational institution. And our office is our own desks, personal desks. So that's how we operate. No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Jovi. All right. Do you have some follow-up question, Professor Reynald Cacho?
Critique is not charging the publication processing fee.
No, we've never charged any processing fee since 2007 and until today.
There's a downside and upside in charging processing fee for publication. And of course, there are also some clamor with regard to reviewers asking for or getting some incentives or other, how do you call this, motivation for them to review certain papers. How do we best motivate reviewers to review the papers and submit it on time? Do you have other tips on, or things you could say to the reviewers?
My practice is to actually invite the reviewers after they review a paper, if they want to publish a paper. And that's it. I just want to involve them in the community. Maybe they can, of course, appreciate the fact that they can publish with Critique, much like how anyone can publish. So we ask for something and we also give something in return. But of course, monetary incentives is not something that we can, of course, accommodate. So Critique is not always expecting funding from the university, and at the end of the day, if the funding stops from the university or from CHED or from any other institution, we have to pay for all the expenses using our own pockets. So that's how we operated from 2007 to 2011. We always paid for everything. Dr. Bolaños and I share the expenses of running the journal, and it's not obscenely expensive. It's something that you can afford by setting aside, for example, the money that most people would spend on Starbucks on a monthly basis. You can set that aside, and you can actually pay for the hosting and the domain costs of the journal. Of course, it becomes more difficult when you have to operate other expenses such as the acquisition of DOI. So if you're going to get a DOI membership, that's around $240 every year. For every article, you have to pay $1. If it's older than 3 years, of course, the cost gets lower, I think around 10 cents. So I forgot to mention that a while ago. That's one of the biggest costs of or operations that we need to pay for in Critique, and that's something that you have to also consider.
Thank you.
Thank you so much po,
Sir
Dr.
Jason.
Pada. Yes, sir.
My question is siguro the two speakers can answer this, and the research ethics seems to be very generic if we're going to take a look at the journal. But as I try to take a look at it, it seems that this should be the basis in handling disputes, particularly. So what are your or how did you handle those disputes, or maybe some specific examples, and based on your existing research ethics, or did you make any made any recalibration because of certain disputes na I need to change some of this, it's because of our experiences. So what is your take on that?
Sir Joe.
Well, first may I ask what sort of disputes? Like
for example, sir, there's one author who submitted an article and then na-publish, for example, dun sa isa, and then not knowingly na-publish din dun sa ano, and then plagiarism. So may mga ganun po mga issues. Currently, may mga submissions po kami na napansin na ganun. Pero sabi ko, paano how are we going to handle those issues?
For us, in the first place, it's always better to sabi nga nila, prevention better than cure, no? So first, I personally I check the background of the author, and I also check his publication record. So I check the academia, I check if he has an ORCID, all those things. And then I also Google about the topic, because I cannot use the Turnitin yet when he submits, no? So I have to, because there's one particular instance where this paper that this particular author submitted to us was actually submitted to there's this platform where authors can submit their articles. Parang it's pre-publication thing na nandun yung kanyang papel. So I emailed him back about this, and yun, inexplain niya naman kung ano, but eventually winidraw niya yung kanyang paper. No, so yung ganun, it's sometimes you have to be meticulous, no, pagdating doon para kasi, and then of course it should be clear na while their paper is submitted for review, hindi nila pwede itong isubmit sa ibang journals, no? So ganun yung kailangan ma-prevent din. Pero in case na mangyari yon, well, you have to just abide by your criteria, by the ethics of your publication. No, you cannot compromise that. No, plagiarize, talagang hindi pwede. Or right there and then hindi pwede yon. Or for example, say publish na sa ibang journal, so kailangan mo i-confront you have to ask the author about that, and if it's really been published in a different journal already. Therefore, you can no longer publish that anymore. No? So sometimes there are authors who would ask permission to include their published articles in like for example in a book. That's okay, provided, as Dr. Arte mentioned, that you have to cite the original publisher. Like for example, it's been published originally in Philosophia or in Critique, then you have to acknowledge that. So it's for us, it's more on preventing these disputes. Now, if you think of this, for example, there could also be disputes about certain reviews. Well, it could be settled internally among the reviewers or in the editorial board kung magkaiba yung kanilang assessment or review for a particular paper.
In our case, we also had a very similar incident. Plagiarism check kami for the submitted paper, and of course nagkaroon ng hit. The hit was a blog post. Okay? Apparently one of the submission is actually a blog post, a very elaborate blog post. So we had to confirm with the author if the author is indeed the author. And may instance na ganun nga yung nangyari, and it's okay, it's fine. Okay? But of course, the paper didn't pass the review process, so hindi rin na-publish. So in the case of publication ethics, there should be a commitment by the author to only submit the paper one at a time for every journal, because if they submit it to another journal, chances are the journal that they submitted the paper first is going to use a plagiarism checker. So sila rin yung magkaka-problem eventually in the end. So kami, when we begin with our screening process, papadaanin namin kagad yun as much as possible sa Turnitin, and that paper is already flagged as submitted to Critique. And they'd be in trouble if they submit it to another journal. They'd have to contact us or contact one of the editors of Critique to verify that. So also one thing that you also have to include in the ethics publication page, that's actually a standard. That's something that Scopus and Web of Science is always going to look for. Even yung DOAJ, yung Open Access Journal repository, and a lot of other indexing sites are always going to look for the ethics page for the journal site. Yun yung suggestion ko rin, Sir Rod. Siguro maglagay na rin kayo ng ethics page nyo. A lot of the friends and co-editors of other journals are usually going to copy templates. Although yung sa amin, experience namin with Critique, there's this Indian university that copied the wording of the Critique site word per word, and that really upset us. In fact, we're trying to think of a way to fund the Digital Millennium Copyright Act surveys of taking down the site. Pero mahal yung takedown service nila. I think it's $100. So siguro pag wala na kaming maisip na gawin, baka i-take down na namin. Kasi gayang-gaya pati yung sections ng you should look for it. Ravenshaw Journal of Philosophy, I think that's the name of it's an Indian thing. But yeah, it happens. You should be very careful about the site. So kaya if you're going to visit Critique right now, you can't use the right-click button to select or copy or paste the site. I know it's a hassle, but we're trying to look for a workaround so that it would be easier to copy the DOI number for the specific article that you're viewing. So I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pada. Sir Randy, you have some question?
Yeah, I have another question. There are two things that I listened to Dr. Jube and Dr. Roland. Dr. Roland mentioned about ethics. Dr. Jube mentioned about looking into the author, like going to ResearchGate, I think, or academia. May I ask, for you are already editors, may I ask if credibility of an author is an issue for you? Like, if this author comes from a not well-known college or he has not published anything yet, is it really an issue that would affect your decision on either accepting or rejecting a paper? Because again, kinakain ko na yung rejection eh, lalo na pag Scopus Index Journal. So, kaya nga sabi ko kanina, I received that, have your paper edited by kasi alam nila, I'm from the Philippines. They know that my English is Filipino English. I'm not an American English or British English. So, yun ang first question ko. Meron ba talagang ganun na you are looking into the credibility of the author?
Okay.
Thank you.
First, I look into the credibility of the author, but the credibility of the author is not totally dependent on whether you come from a small or big college. Like for example, in Philosophia, if you're going to check the contributors, because I always put their notes on contributors, you're going to see their up and coming scholars. I always make it a point that I include at least one up and coming scholar or from a not so well known school whose paper is really a good paper. So I check the credibility in the sense that I want to know if he, kanina sabi ko, nagpa-publish ba siya kung saan-saan? So that's how important the credibility of the author also. Baka mamaya lagi siyang kung ano ni kanyang mga sinusulat, nagpe-plagiarize, ganyan-ganyan. So that's very important, no? Kasi if the author is credible in the sense that meron siyang integridad sa kanyang ginagawa, chances are hindi siya gagawa ng kalokohan sa kanyang publication, di ba? But the integrity should not be based on whether this author came from sa ganitong school or halimbawa came from sa ganitong bansa, no? Or sa ibang, we have a good, actually sa Philosophia, we have a good mix of contributors. Doon sa aming, in our commemorative issue, meron kaming ano doon, bagong graduate na nagte-take ng MA. So ibig sabihin, you have to look at the article itself, how it is written. Not necessarily kung sino yung author, but of course, the integrity of the author is also very important because you can only produce something based on your character. That's how I personally also check on it. And then sometimes, like for example, I have received this paper. It's a very good paper. So sabi, sino na kaya nagsulat nito? So I have to check. Kasi parang, I find it rather unbelievable na napakaganda ng papel. So my suspicion ko ay, teka, baka kinopya ito, baka kung saan ito galing. So I check. And then I realize na this is a graduate student na naging maganda yung kanyang scholastic record na talaga siyang nagsusulat talaga siya. So I check yung kanyang, kasi you can also find some of the papers that he published. Like for example, sa academia, uso na ngayon, hindi pa published, nandun na yung kanilang papel. So when you check on that, quality yung paper niya, so you can now check, you can verify, okay, so this is how good he writes. So this must really be his own paper. Yun ang yung sagot ko. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc.
Just to respond to, we don't really check for the credentials. We don't really care if you're Filipino, if you're coming from a different country. The screening process means that only the managing editor is going to know the name of the contributor. Okay? So, pagdating na sa mga magdi-mediate, yung check ng quality, hindi namin alam kung sino yung author. So there's several layers of anonymity that happens in Critique. So when we submit it to an external referee, the external referee doesn't also know who you are. So I believe if your paper was been subjected to that same kind of procedure, you just have to of course, take it as a constructive criticism. Baka naman masyadong salbahe yung, yung criticism nung reviewer, and that's also one of the responsibilities that we try to do as an editor, because sometimes the referees are cranky. Sometimes the referees are would you say it, masungit yung referee. Or I remember one of my referees that I always consult for a specific theme of paper would even say that this paper does not deserve to exist, things like that. Of course, I have to edit that. I have to reread the comments, because I know it's quite cruel, okay, and he has the right to say that, because he is an expert in that field. But I don't think it's necessary for the referee to say that this paper does not deserve to exist, or nor should the author receive that kind of comment. So that's a balancing act that you have to do as an editor-in-chief and as a managing editor. You have to tone down some of the tempers or the temperaments of the referees, and of course you don't confront the referees because they're also important. So hayaan nyo na silang magsungit, but of course be there to handle those things and mitigate the possibility of hurting or hurting someone using words. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pada. Dr. Abenes, can we extend more time?
May question lang ako. Yung isa kasing question ni Sir Randy is about rejection. Pero, di ba, rejection can be of two ways. Pwedeng hindi maganda yung paper, or the paper is really good, which is you feel that that paper is not really for your journal. Or maybe, for example, there are problems with regards to reviewers. So how do you handle those issues?
Okay. Sa Philosophia kasi may option doon yung there's an option for the reviewer to check whether that this article is not suited for the Philosophia. It may be suited for another journal. Especially if the topic is not really within the scope of the journal. So that's one. And then the other is ano ba yung second point mo, Rod? Nawala sa isip ko yung second point mo.
Sir, yung medyo magandang journal, magandang article. So how do you handle or how do you address if you feel na walang reviewers?
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to be honest to the author, and that happens to Philosophia, because, like for example, somebody submitted on Arab philosophy. I know the paper is good. I know the paper is good, but I have to find an expert on Arab philosophy. And sad to say, I have to let it go because I don't have a reviewer for that paper. So we just inform him that he could probably submit the paper to another journal who has a reviewer on Arab philosophy. Kasi unfair naman kung i-hold mo yung paper na yon, which can be published in a different journal na kayang i-handle yung ganong klase ng paper.
On our part, this is at least my experience when I was a managing editor. We usually get theology papers that are more inclined towards theology rather than philosophy, and I would usually recommend that they submit. I'll give them options. Dati meron ako shortlist na ng journals na pwedeng pag-submitan ng iba-ibang disciplines that would usually find its way somewhat in Critique. So yung common dyan is I used to get a lot from theology. Okay, minsan madalas din yung education, which in some parts they're not really slanted towards philosophy. So remember, Critique is a philosophy journal. So yun yung nagiging issue namin palagi. So we have to politely tell them that the journal doesn't cater to that type of topic, and we would suggest X, Y, and Z kung ano yung mga possible na journals na alam namin that would handle them. So for example, we could recommend them to submit to Critica Cultura, okay, for example, or some other known journals that we are familiar with. Pero in some cases, yes, that does happen. We do sometimes experience issues when we don't have the right referee for a certain topic. I'll admit that one of those topics is, of course, analytic philosophy. Medyo mahina ang kritike doon. Kulang kami usually ng pool of referees back in those days. But I think some of the referees are usually sourced from right now from DLSU. Sila Sir Napna Bacquiao, Sir JJ Joaquin. We always borrow them when we get papers from continental philosophy. Dati from analytic philosophy. Dati wala talaga kaming reader sa analytic philosophy. So that's what we do. We in some cases, sobrang kulang talaga yung time. We ask the author if they're willing to wait or if they want to pull out. That's one thing that a journal can do to help the author. Because I mean, sometimes the author would really insist on publishing with us, okay, and it's not really worried about the time element that is involved in reviewing the paper, so we accept it, okay. So that's what we do with at least that's what we used to do in when I was a managing editor.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Aguas and Dr. Pada, for your generosity, and you're ready to answer all of our questions. But we still have a lot of questions in our chat box. So, Dr. Abenes, can we still entertain some of our questions? And
siguro last two na lang siguro before we kung okay pa sa atin pero anyway, very generous sa atin Sir Aguas.
I think I can answer the question on hacking of journal websites, the technicality, because that's what I always worry about in Critique. So the problem with it's not really hacking, directly hacking by someone attacking your site. Most of these problems happen when you use WordPress on your site and you don't update the security features of the site. And in most cases, it also happens when you use a template from some untrustworthy source. So yung template mismo yung merong malicious na code, and that gets flagged down by the hosting server, and the site goes down. Okay, so that's why I strongly recommend anyone who wants to establish a journal site to actually learn site coding from scratch. Meron naman mga madadaling alternatives. Like I think Sir Joe, di ba you use Wix?
Yeah.
So Wix is actually a very robust system.
Yeah.
Website X is also something that we use in Critique. And of course, you can use traditional HTML, yung frames lang. Okay, the website doesn't have to be aesthetically pleasant. The website doesn't have to have all the fancy features. It just needs all the regular content that you want to see in a journal, about us, contributors, ethics page, submissions, etc. The rest is, of course, icing. So that's my recommendation. So if you're worried about technical irregularities or getting hacked, I'd suggest you stay away from WordPress, unless, of course, you're very familiar with how to update certain modules in WordPress, and so on and so forth. Marami na rin ako nakakausap na editors na nagka-problem with WordPress. That's why I don't recommend using WordPress. So if anything, Wix is a good and very convenient website editor. So it's not very difficult to learn. Just spend a day or two, you can pretty much design the site.
In our case, tama si RT, I use wix.com. Actually, ako lang yung gumagawa ng website. Of course, with the assistance of lagi andyan si RT. Pagka may technical problem ako, difficulty. So, I think that's one thing that you have to invest on para secured yung website niyo. So, at ako wala akong so far kami hope salamat sa Diyos wala kaming problema about this matters.
Just to add then, I strongly recommend running the hosting service and the domain service individually, privately. What's the deal with this? Because for example, in our case, we don't actually host the site using UST's servers and UST's domain, because the difficulty of uploading content to that means that, for example, may pandemic, we have to go there and be physically in UST to upload all the new issues and any changes that we want to have with the site. Then of course, the tech support is going to be an 8 to 5 Monday to Friday thing. Kasi of course, walang pasok yan beyond 8 to 5 or in Saturdays and Sundays, or if may training seminar ang EdTech or whatever facility that they have, they won't be able to entertain us. So for me, it's a very good way of how would you say this, streamlining the operation of the journal if the journal is actually run by a private person or an individual who's willing to invest time on learning how hosting and domain services work and have it directly or even privately maintained by that person. So that's what we invested in when the journal was still being run by just a few people before we even got into UST. Kaya we have the full control of the site. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Sir Jason, last question ako. How do you, syempre, it's an investment of time and also, but also money, since it's, di ba, you run the website and then most likely the website, Filosofia and also Critique ay self-finance din ng organization or even minsan dukot bulsa din yung mga editors. Pero how do you plan, for example, the budget? For example, the domain fee, and then another would be, for example, we receive notifications with regards to the storage in the website. So saan po mas makakatipid with regards on that, and how are we going to plan those things? For example, if we wanted our journal to be
my suggestion is for ease of use and convenience din nung payment, go with just one service. Yun nga, yung kay Sir Jove. Sir Jove uses Wix. Wix will already take care of the domain and the hosting and even the site editor. So parang ano siya, what you see is what you get na editor yan eh. So on my part, if you want to get into the technical nitty-gritty, I'd recommend buying the domain and hosting from a reputable reseller like GoDaddy.com. That's where we manage the domain for Critique. And of course, we have a different server. May server kami na malaki yung storage. That's why we are not really worried about it. So for the cost, if you're just going to have around, let's say, 2 gigs or 3 gigs or 5 gigs, I think you can spend around 500 to 1,000 pesos a month for the hosting. The hosting one is actually more expensive than the domain. The domain, you can buy it for 1,000 pesos and that's good for a year. You can even buy it in advance for as long as 9 years or more para hindi mo na siya iisipin. So the hosting, however, has to be paid either monthly, and the longest period that you can actually pay a hosting service is around 3 years, because they have to change the prices every 3 years depending on the cost and expense of maintaining those servers. So when you rent an actual server, it's going to give you a lot of space and a very good amount of bandwidth, and meron ding redundancy yan. So that's why I strongly also recommend not running the entire site within the Philippines. The IT infrastructure in the Philippines is not very good. We don't have a lot of data centers here. Those data centers abroad have redundant power backup systems, and minsan connect sila diretso dun sa power grid. So even if magkaroon ng power interruptions, they have backup. So I strongly recommend offshore hosting of the site content. Pero as I've seen the site, Sir Rod, maganda yung ginawa mo. Parang YouTube links na lang. Don't host the videos there. Kasi tataas yung cost ng expenses mo, lalo na pag marami kang nilagay na videos. I experienced this when hosting services used to have a bandwidth cap. Meron bandwidth cap dati. If you exceed, let's say, 5 gigs of bandwidth, transfer and send, mag-shut down yung site mo. Ngayon, nowadays, of course, it's now free. So your main concern now is, of course, yung storage. And I think it's way more cheaper to actually rent storage spaces for hosting abroad using those reputable servers.
All right. So I think, Dr. Arbenes, this is the end of our Q&A.
Yes, but before siguro closing remark ni EDP, I would like to acknowledge kasi marami actually din dito mga editors in chief. So kasi sooner or later we'll be also inviting you because it's a good thing that we will be able to really share our own experiences in terms of managing the journal. As I have said, wala tayong formal training dito. So it's high time to articulate those practices that we have. So we have Sir Jeric Abella. He is the editor-in-chief of Tala. Sir Jeric, pwedeng magpakita ka muna. Sir Jeric. So, and also we have Sir Peter of CES. Sir Jeric, pwede bang makita ka muna namin para at least ano? Okay, then we have also Sir Peter. I think nandito rin si Sir Peter. This is Sir Jeric. So he's the managing editor of the editor-in-chief of Tala. And then also we have and then we also have Sir Peter Eliucor, the editor-in-chief of CES. And then we have also si Sir Peter yata ito. And then we also have the managing editor of San Jose de Recoletos, a multidisciplinary journal. And I think nandito rin si Dr. Glenn Pajares, the Dean for Graduate School of San Jose de Recoletos. So medyo marami-rami po din tayo ditong mga ano. So anyway, I would like to thank you.
I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Altes Albella. She's also one of the founding editors of Critique and she's been there since the beginning. So, hi ma'am.
Gandang umaga po. Ay, katanghali.
Okay, Sir Jason.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arbenes. And so we proceed with the awarding of certificate to our guest speakers for today. So please share our certificate, Sir Mark.
Sige po, sir. Kinukuha ko lang po.
Ayan. Okay. Maybe some of our questions in our chat box, maybe we can answer that through emails. So can we get the email of Dr. Jovi and Dr. Pada? If you have some questions, you can just send or in their website. You can post some questions in their website through their official email. If we still have some questions. Okay, so allow me to read the citation of our certificate. Philippine Normal University, South Luzon, National Teacher for Teacher Education. The Technology and Livelihood Education Hub. The certificate of recognition is hereby awarded to Dr. Jovi Jim S. Aguas for his invaluable service as the resource speaker during the Editors Collective on Journal Management hosted by PNU South Luzon on March 11, 2021 via Zoom application, given this 11th day of March 2021, signed Dr. Roel V. Avila, the Executive Director and Provost, PNU South Luzon. The same citation is given to virtual a round of applause, please. Same citation. The certificate of recognition is hereby awarded to Dr. Roland Teus Diaz Pada. Do I pronounce it correct, Dr. Pada?
There's no correct pronunciation. I don't know. I'll ask my dad.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, but it's fine. It's fine.
Thank you so much, Doc. So virtual round of applause, please, for our brilliant speakers for today. Surely we learned a lot today, for sure. And we are so thankful. So let's get it on. To complete our program for today, so allow me to introduce to you our Executive Director and Provost, very supportive, Dr. Roel V. Avila.
Sir Jason, I was not able to catch the first part of this webinar because we gave in to the interview by the Philippine Statistics Office regarding the national ID. But I heard Sir Roland Diaz Pada and you, Sir Jason De Vera, conversing when you said when you mentioned that you are still young. It's really important for us to engage in the operation of journal management and publication while we are still young. And many of the participants know that. On my part, it is a slipped opportunity, actually. It took for me 50 years before I became a referee in an international journal. And time is indeed a consideration in having a paper approved and published, experiencing rejection of submitted articles means extra time, or we ought to start anew. Every participant in this webinar knows that editing is a necessary evil in journal management, and post-editing period necessitates time, likewise. Time value is most important in life, for we know that low tide or high tide waits for none. It takes time and series of webinars before the LUCAD launching in May 2021. It's going to be a great relief, Dr. Joe, to be notified of a final proof approval. Ang sarap nun. We were fresh college graduates then when we agreed to found a community newspaper, and we invited our municipal mayor, who was an attorney at law. His message was tears, devoid of superfluity, and it was quite disappointing on my part that he did not explicitly tell us what he meant by his story, that one day a rooster decided to look for food, and along the way he met a hen and danced around her, forgetting that he was looking for something. And to find that something, like journal management, needs really focus, commitment, some sacrificial acts. So I think that's how I interpreted the message of my mayor, that really there are intervening things or variables that occur in our lives. So it really needs commitment for us to go through to finish the processes for us to become successful. Dean Rod, please extend our greetings to all the speakers and participants, our appreciation to all of them for taking part in this series of webinar. Thank you very much, all participants. God bless us all.
Maraming salamat po, Dr. Avila. Some reminders before we have the final video presentation. May we invite everyone to please evaluate our program for today. The link for evaluation is already posted in our chat box. So please access our evaluation. After the evaluation, you will be able to receive your certificate of participation for today's event. Also, we already posted the link for the invitation for our editors, and it's already in the flood. We will repost the link anyway. Okay, so let's have some.
Okay, so thank you very much, Sir Jason. I'm just going to show to you our event in PNPRS. So I'm also the PRO PNPRS, and currently we're planning to have a memorandum of understanding partnership with PNPRS. So that's why it's high time also to show ano yung mga ginagawa ng PNPRS as a philosophical society. Just to end our webinar.
Muli po, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat sa inyong pagdalo sa ating palihan.